Some of the questions I had to leave out because it's just not safe for this platform. Would you ever date any of your subs romantically? This is a hard question to answer. The risk was too high for like an actual fatality. Is there a limit to the pain I'm willing to inflict? Do you want a story? Welcome to another episode of Uncensored. Today I have a anonymous Ask Me Anything that was posted on my Instagram stories, and here is every single question that you all asked me. I don't know who put in these questions. Some of the questions I had to leave out because it's just not safe for this platform, but we still have a good chunk despite it all. So here we go. Starting off, will you get married? What is the suitable man for you? Will I get married? We'll see. I don't think I'm super tied to the idea of marriage. I'm more tied to the idea of having really good arrangements with subs long term. And in terms of a suitable man for me, why are you assuming it's a man, first of all? And who is suitable? I think because of how well my subs treat me and kind of like the level of attention and care that I tend to get already, it's going to be a very high bar. I think that's all I'm going to say about that. Are you bi? How often are you with women? I am bi. And how often am I with women? I'm more often with women in my personal life. For some reason, when I am doming professionally, there tends to be like 99.9%. It's just men who reach out to me. Not sure why. I think maybe it's because of my femme presentation. But yeah, I have a lot of friends who I play with, and there's kind of like an organic, I think, dynamic in the sex work industry where people kind of play and we have like little parties and we all hang out in that way. I do love shooting with women too. I have a lot of content out with different like pro subs and porn performers who enjoy bottoming, and I have a lot of pegging scenes of that, so that's a lot of fun. Are there any bucket list kinks / scenes you want to try but haven't yet? Yes, there are some scenes that I want to shoot that is a little bit more complex and a little bit more creative that I have not been able to do yet. Some really interesting cosplay sort of scenes that I need a full location, full set, wardrobe, hair, makeup done, and also a sub who has seen the anime very, very clearly and understands the character so that for us to roleplay fully. And of course, like the harder sadistic kinks and fetishes, kidnapping scenes or like hard blood play scenes that don't sell well, but I still want to do anyway and figure out a way to distribute it for the folks who want to. I am in the process of perhaps creating some kind of VHS tape situation for scenes like that. And for those who are big fans of that side of my personality, I'll mail it to you the old-fashioned way. What is your favorite memory in your career as a dominatrix? My favorite, oh my gosh, there's so many. This is a hard question to answer. There are so many good memories. I mean, I've been doing this for almost 6 years now, and I feel like every month, sometimes like every single week, there's something unique and new that's happening. I think for favorite memory, oh my gosh. This is so hard. I think we have to narrow it down, but like favorite session scene or like favorite dinner or like favorite travel situation. Is there someone that kind of like hit all of that recently? Favorite memory? I once did this really beautiful scene with a sub in his home, and he's never done needle play before, and I wanted to do kind of like a domestic scene with him where he is like food for me. So I laid him on his kitchen table and was like threading the needles like through his body in a really sort of like precise way, like as if I'm curating a meal. And I think that's one of my favorite scenes of all time because there was such a intimacy to it of him handing over his body, doing something totally new, being in his home in this setting that he eats at every single day, that he cooks at, that feels like very familiar, yet like we were able to um kind of like layer another dimension onto it. And he said that that scene like released so much tension in his body in a way that like he hasn't felt before, and it was just really, yeah, it was really really successful, and we really bonded in that moment. So I think that's one of my favorite scenes right now, although the favorite always changes depending on the day or month and when you're asking me, but that's a highlight. Hmm. Would you ever date any of your subs romantically? I think subs that I am in a arrangement with or long-term DS dynamics is romantic. Um, and I think that is pretty accurate to the way I dom too, right? There's a level of affection and care and trust in those dynamics, within the boundaries of like a very clear value exchange and how they're adding to my life. I don't sort of like date in the like I'm swiping on Hinge or swiping on Tinder. I've never been on those apps. Uh, and I don't think that format works for me to meet people, and I don't think that's a very effective way for me to like create relationships anyway. Yeah. What is something a client has asked for that you found shocking? There has been a few things that clients have asked for that were a bit shocking, but to be honest, at this point of my life, there's nothing that is too shocking that I feel uncomfortable about. Even when there's a level of like, oh, I've never seen this before, or I've never encountered this before, there's always a lot of curiosity first and foremost. Mm, I think something that has been interesting recently is I don't get a lot of ABDL requests, and ABDL means like adult, what is it called again? Adult baby. I'm not quite sure what it stands for, but it's like adult baby stuff. And this sub very specifically asked for like a type of like diapering and pampering and like pacifier stuff for him to very comfortably regress into a state where he's fully taken care of. I've never gotten a request like that before, and I kind of like jumped at the bit to try to experience that and like really be in a sort of like mother role that I've never um explored in myself or with a sub before. So that's kind of interesting. I feel like that's going to be a new experiment for me. I haven't done this session yet, so I'm curious about how I'm going to react to it, taking care of him in that way. And I remember in his form, he very specifically said things like, he doesn't want to be humiliated, he doesn't want to be degraded, he just wants to feel like really safe and like really get into that headspace of like having nothing in his psyche other than being like really, really like cared for, that can't be replicated in other ways. So that was kind of fascinating. And I'm already like planning sort of the different ways I can like get him into that state and have fun with it. What is a common misconception about hard sadists in BDSM that you would like to correct? I think a common misconception is probably that we're all like sociopathic. That's something I see. It's like, oh, if you're into this, there must be something like really deeply wrong with your psyche, and that's something you have to like medicate or like therapize yourself out of. Um, in my experience, though, hard sadists who do it well are really, really intuitively aware of like what another person's body is going through, and they like enjoy the extremes of what one can do to the body. At least for me, that tends to be the case. What I like most about sadism is I get to like very extremely show you like how severe my feelings are, and I want to see you take it as hard as you can and like give yourself over to me in that way. So I think that that tends to be a big misconception, and I think that misconception possibly comes from a very sort of like male-dominated idea of how sadism is supposed to work, which is, not with very little negotiation or like with the level of like force and coercion that I hope becomes less common over time and less practiced over time too. Is there a limit to how much pain you're willing to inflict, or does it depend on the sub? Conversely, have you ever had a client who wanted more than you were willing to give, and how did you handle it? Is there a limit to the pain I'm willing to inflict? The limit depends on the sub. I'm a very hard sadist to the point where if there is a sub who is willing to break a bone and have it heal properly, and my limit is, obviously I don't inflict any kind of pain that is beyond repair, right? So no dismemberment, but if it's like bone breaking, things like that, I'm very okay with it. I'm fine with it. I tend to be on the very, very extreme end of sadism for that reason. And I have to be like really aware of the sub's limits, and we have to really negotiate it if they want to do something that extreme. If there is a client who wanted, I haven't had a client who wanted more than I was willing to give. It's hard to find a person right now who can take more than I want to give, and I'm fine with, working within people's limitations. I guess like the one time that a sub asked for something that was quite sadistic, that I was not willing to give was sort of the risk was too high for, like an actual fatality. And this was a person who requested like quite like a very, 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 very risky like hanging scene. And I just didn't feel comfortable or well versed enough to do it properly. And I think that scene was also like, it's just way, way too risky. And I hope that he was able to find other ways to indulge in that fetish with someone who's safe. How far do you go with controlling a slave in a blackmail scenario? Again, whatever that person can handle, because I'm very willing to go all the fucking way. And that includes like blackmail that is extremely, extremely, bordering on like real life consequences. There's been times where I've done blackmail where I have, you know, schedules sent out emails, and if they don't do XYZ task, I don't log back into the email to prevent the email from being sent out. There's also, blackmail scenarios where I have like GPS tracked people and, sent letters that have to be intercepted. So I'm pretty willing to go pretty hard on the blackmail as long as I know that the sub has had experience and knows that even if it's in a CNC situation, like what tapping out looks like, right? Like how far is too far. And that is a individual by individual basis for something that high risk. I oftentimes get blackmail fantasies that act or the sub thinks they want something really extreme because they want to feel that fear. But after talking to them, I can kind of parse out real limits, right, around relationships or family or work that once they're out of that scene, I know they would not actually want. With blackmail too, I try to be very careful with the sub not using BDSM as a way to self-harm or self-destruct. And so I have quite a lengthy conversation and quite a lengthy sort of like training process to get to know them before engaging in these types of acts, obviously. And if you come across a dom who doesn't have those types of conversations and just agrees to a scene like that, you're kind of asking for something bad to happen, right? Are there any misconceptions you want to clear up, either about yourself or the community at large? Are there any misconceptions about me that I want to clear up? I don't think there's any like big floating misconceptions about me right now. I think maybe Are there any misconceptions about me? I don't really think so that I can think of. And misconceptions about the community. Um, yeah, I think I've addressed this quite a bit, but the biggest misconceptions about the community is that, it's um uh, like not really a healthy space for people, and I think like there's whereas how do I say this? I think the biggest misconception is that everyone who practices BDSM is like mentally unwell, and in my experience, the people in this community are oftentimes a lot better at negotiating consent and understanding like what a partner wants, because there's so many um practices around talking about desire, especially like difficult desire, that is, taught and encouraged. I think that's probably the biggest misconception. Did you make Marcelo cry? I did make Marcelo cry, and you can see it for yourself. I beat him up pretty bad, especially with that paddle. So I beat him up until his like ass was bleeding, and he was crying on the floor afterwards. He said he could take it, and he could, but he did call red after a certain point, and then I stopped, and he was crying. But it was very cute when he was sobbing on the floor. Who was your favorite collab with so far? Favorite collab. Okay. There's like hard sadistic collabs. Marcelo's a lot of fun, right? He was like a little monkey screaming and like climbing around the the floor, and he's really really expressive when he's getting beat up. I love that. I love an expressive sub, and it's really really satisfying for me. Other collabs I really enjoy is probably I shot with Alric Angel in Vegas recently, and that was a more standard like pegging, chastity type of scene, and that was a lot of fun. Like that type of sensual domination with him. Oh, so good. And he's such a pretty boy too, so it helps with the scene. Do many guys want to get I kind of want to get does that make me gay? Speaking of misconceptions, that's a big one too. Yes, a lot of guys want to get and it's very normal to enjoy it, and it feels really good if you have a prostate. That does not make you gay unless you're getting by a man, right? And even then, even if you're getting by a man, if you're not sexually attracted to men, it doesn't make you gay. It just means your body's going through something and you're exploring it. That's all it is, right? A dildo is not a substitution for your broader sexuality. A dildo is a piece of plastic. There's no gender attached to it, and the only gender attached to it is a person that it is strapped onto. If you're thinking about it though, maybe it's okay to explore your bisexuality. That's totally fine too. And if it's a gateway to you exploring your sexuality, let it happen. Enjoy it, do it with someone cool and fun. When it comes to filming, how do you choose the sex workers you film with and the subs/bottoms you use in your content? When it comes to filming, I tend to rely on word of mouth first and foremost. A lot of the pro subs that I have worked with are all verified and highly recommended by DOMs who I know and by my friends. I tend to only work with subs who are in that category. For my subs who I have a personal dynamic with, these are subs who have like contributed quite a bit to my life, and they've earned the privilege of being on camera for me. Although I have to say, just because I have a dynamic with a sub, that it doesn't necessarily mean they're good on camera, right? We can have a really good like one-on-one play session, but the moment there's a camera on, they get really nervous, they feel, some type of way. So it's a kind of like test and trial process too for personal subs. Aside from being truly amazing and magnificent, what do you think attributes to your success to all avenues of work that you do? Thank you for that little compliment. I feel like you might be one of my subs who asked this. What attributes to my success? Mm, I think there's a few kind of like really I think there's probably a few qualities that I try to hang on to when it comes to work, right? And those qualities include a high level of consistency. I try to create a pretty robust infrastructure around myself. So right now I have a team of 8 that I have handpicked and hired to run a lot of the admin and managerial tasks in my life for like both digital and the in-person side. And one of the best skills that I think translated from doming to delegation is being able to very clearly communicate goals and like the steps towards those goals in concise ways, and then setting clear deadlines for those goals to be met. Mm, Another really good quality I think that translated from doming to the business side is understanding at what point you have to let someone go. I have had a few people who were previously on my team, but because they were not performing in a way that was working, um, I, had some skill sets from letting go of subs in those hard conversations with those people around like, hey, this is not performing. That doesn't mean that like we don't get along, right? But we have to part ways in this capacity. So there's a lot of overlap, in my opinion, between the two. What else contributes to success? I think a high level of discipline whenever possible. So I'm quite disciplined with myself, and in the way that I conduct my own life. And I try to lead by example for like my subs and for the people that I work with. And I think that tends to all kind of like work together pretty well. Yeah. Thoughts on the giantess fetish? What would you do if you found a tiny person, 1 inch tall? Do you want a story? I think it's really fun. It's something that I've wanted to film a little bit more. I do have a few videos that's along the lines of the giantess fantasy, and I had a little phase where I was reading giantess hentai just because it was interesting. I think it's a lot of fun. I think it's untapped. And if I found a tiny person who is only 1 inch tall, I think I'm going to like poke them with my finger and kind of like prod them around a tiny bit. And then I want to like put the person in my mouth and just like swirl them around and spit them out and just like play around with like how tiny they are and like overwhelming them. And like maybe, I don't know, put them in my shoe, step on them a tiny bit, who knows, like tuck them in my bra and walk around. There's so many options for a 1 inch person. If you could go back to when you first started in sex work, what advice would you have given yourself? Ooh, when I first started, what advice would I have given myself? I really wish I started the digital side of things during COVID, because that was an untapped opportunity with such like, everyone was at home and everyone was online, and I'm just sort of like, I wish I started it at that time, but I wasn't ready for it yet. At During 2020, I was still face in. So I was face in, and I was still like really taking my time making sure that this is what I wanted to do for the next like, decade or foreseeable future. And so there's like ups and downs to it, right? Like I really thought my way through, but if I started during COVID, I can't imagine how good my digital side would be right now, but that's the only thing. I would have told myself that. Do you have any loyal female slaves? Feel like I don't really see them in your posts. Yeah, I don't really have fem subs right now, and I would love to have fem subs. I just, I think the demographic overlap is not quite there. Mm, but this is a good reminder. I should probably do some reels and create some posts with more fem subs. Is there anyone in your dream board that you would still love to work with or double with that you haven't? Also, any place you want to visit you haven't either. Any person I would love to work with and double with that I haven't yet. I would love to do a video with my friend Ava O. And I would love to work with like Mika Kitana too. I think they're both powerhouses and it'll be fantastic to collab with them. I would also love to work with Alexandra Snow. I think she's a fantastic dom and such a fantastic businesswoman too. And if I were able to make that happen, that'll be like a dream come true. Any place I want to visit that I haven't, I've always wanted to visit Switzerland, but I will be going there end of April. So that dream is going to become reality very, very soon. Do you have a preference for what type of men you dominate? For example, small men. Is this the same person who asked me about a giantess fetish? I don't really have a type that I love to dominate. What I usually say to subs is I really enjoy figuring out like what buttons to push in your brain and also in your body. And everyone has such different buttons and it's always interesting for me, right? Um, yeah, so I don't have really a hard preference for it other than you understand yourself well enough to enjoy subbing and be in like a healthy mental constitution. That's it for this episode of Uncensored. See you next time.